Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Anka. I'm a registered dietitian. I work for a practice called Sound Dietitians, and tonight we are going to be talking about holiday sides that you can make ahead of time. So you can prep them and then bring them to wherever you're going, warm them up a little bit or not at all. But before we get started, I wanted to thank Skagit Regional Health for sponsoring this class tonight and Stilly Valley Health Connections for hosting. Shout out to Christina, who is going to be doing all the camera work. For those of you at home, feel free to enter any questions or comments you have in the chat. Christina, feel free to interrupt at any time with questions. And then for those of you in person, feel free to shout out your questions and comments. I like this to be interactive as possible. So today we are going to be making 3 different recipes. So we have a butternut squash and wild rice stuffing. I do want to note this is not the type of stuffing that you would put in a turkey. So this is just a side dish. We're also going to be making an apple quinoa salad with a curry dressing. This is a really fun recipe, really tasty. And then also a garlic cauliflower mash that has a lot of different herbs. So we're going to start with the butternut squash and wild rice stuffing. So I already have some wild rice simmering away in this pot. Wild rice takes a bit of time to cook, so I started it before the class just to make sure that it would be done by the end of class. You'll see on your recipe it says it can take anywhere from 40 to 55 minutes to cook. Again, wild rice is really, it's a tough type of rice. It has a lot of fiber. It needs a lot of time to cook, and it's not going to turn like soft or mushy. It's going to, we're looking for like a tender rice, but something that still has a little bit of bite to it. So I have that going. It's been going for around 10 minutes, so I'll just keep an eye on the clock and check it. Next, we're going to work on our butternut squash. So I already have my butternut squash cubed. I took off the skin, and then I just did kind of smaller cubes. It's really up to you how big you want the cubes. The bigger they are, the more time it's going to take for them to cook. So I'm just going to put these guys on a sheet pan. It's up to you if you want to line your sheet pan with parchment paper. You don't necessarily have to. It does make cleanup a little bit easier. And we want our squash to be on a single layer. So none of them should be on top of one another. I'm going to add some oil to this. And I already preheated the oven to 425 degrees. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. So that's about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And your recipe doesn't call for this, but I'm going to add a little bit of black pepper as well, just to give it some more flavor. Okay. I'm going to give this a little toss with my hands, make sure all of the squash is coated so that it gets a nice even roast. And then we're going to throw this in the oven for about half an hour, maybe a little bit more. We'll just have to see. It really depends on, you know, how hydrated the squash is, how big you cut it as well. And if you find that you don't like butternut squash, you can use any other type of hard squash. You could do pumpkin, you could do delicata, kombucha, honey nut. All of those are good options. So I'm just going to stick it here in the oven, and we'll just keep an eye on it. So next I want to make the dressing so that the flavors can kind of hang out, mingle together for when we are going to toss our rice with the dressing. So the dressing is going to go on the rice along with some other ingredients, and that's kind of be kind of the bed of the stuffing. It's kind of a layered stuffing. You could also just toss it all together. So we're going to start with a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And I'm just going to make this dressing straight in the measuring cup, just to kind of save on dishes. So we have 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar to give it a little bit of acidity. 1, 2. We're going to do a tablespoon of Dijon. You could also use whatever mustard you have available as well. So the mustard in this recipe acts as an emulsifier, so it's going to help the watery ingredients mix with the olive oil. Okay, just gonna rinse this off real quick. We're also going to add some maple syrup to this. You could also do honey. You could do agave if you wanted, just something to sweeten it up a little bit. Okay. And then we are going to grate about a tablespoon of ginger. So I'm just going to eyeball it. So for this recipe, I decided to peel the ginger. I just used a spoon to take the brown skin off. You could also leave it on. There's, oh no. So that happens sometimes. We're just gonna keep going. So you can leave the skin on if you would like. It's really up to you. I honestly, if I'm cooking ginger, I prefer to leave the skin on just to reduce waste and, not take the extra time to actually take off the peel. But with dressings, I find that the dressing becomes better emulsified if the skin is off. Okay. So my ginger was a little bit dehydrated, so it's taking a little bit longer to grate. And I'm also noticing that the core is it's a little fibrous. I'm just going to use this other piece. So ginger, if you want to store it, you can just stick it in the freezer. That's a really great way to store it. And if it's frozen, it's actually a lot easier to peel with a spoon. Okay. All right, so we got about a tablespoon of grated ginger in there. And let's see. And then we're just going to add a little bit of salt. I'm just eyeballing it and give that a whisk. I'm gonna leave this to the side just so these flavors can kind of hang out. And then before we add this to our rice, I'm gonna whisk it again. That's kind of what it looks like. It's nice and creamy, a little bit thick because of that mustard. I'm just gonna leave that right there. Okay, so we have our rice going, we have our butternut squash going. Gonna jump to the salad recipe and then we'll come back to the other ingredients of the stuffing. So the salad, we're gonna start with adding the quinoa to boiling water. So I have about 2 cups of water just boiling in here. I have my quinoa, about 1 cup. We're gonna rinse the quinoa before we add it to the water. So kind of similar to why we rinse rice before we cook it. It's because there's extra starch on quinoa as well as rice that we don't necessarily need. Once we're done cooking this, we want the quinoa to be nice and fluffy. So any extra starch would not necessarily help with that texture that we're looking for. Okay. All right, so I'm going to let this come to a boil, and then I'm gonna lower it down to a simmer, and it's gonna simmer for about 15 minutes or so. I'm just going to rinse this off because I'm going to need this to drain the rice. Okay. So the quinoa is done pretty much when it no longer looks round. It's going to kind of open up and get all nice and fluffy. And it's tender. So I'll taste it before. And I'm just going to lower the heat now. Just bring it to a simmer. Gonna set a timer just for 15 minutes. Okay. All right. So while that is going, I'm gonna get started on the dressing for the salad. So when I have a big salad like this, I like to make the dressing directly in the bowl that I'm serving it in. It saves you dishes, basically. So here's our big bowl. So we're going to start with about a teaspoon of honey. So I'm just gonna eyeball it. My honey is a little crystallized, but the lemon juice is gonna help to break up those honey crystals and make it nice and smooth. Okay. I'm gonna also add a shallot. So I have it had a little baby guy attached to it. So I'm just gonna cut that up as well. So you want to dice the shallot as finely as you can. That's gonna help with mixing the dressing so it gets nice and emulsified. But also don't worry about it too much because it's all going to be mixed in the end anyways. So to get this nice and fine, I am going to make some cuts lengthwise as well. Okay. And then I'm also going to run my knife a couple of times through it just to get it as small as I can as well. So if you don't have a shallot, you can definitely use any other type of onion, like a sweet onion. You could even do like a red onion. Again, just trying to get it really, really fine. You could honestly even do green onion if you really wanted to in this recipe as well. Okay. Now the shallot is going to give this dressing an oniony taste, but it's going to be a little more mild than if you were to use regular onion. So if you do choose to use regular onion, you probably want to do a little bit less, just so that it's not too pungent. Okay, so I'm just going to add this directly to my bowl. Okay. Next, we have 1 teaspoon of curry powder and salt. So this is going to go straight in. Just be careful with the curry powder. It does like to stain things. So I'm going to try really, really hard not to drop any of it on this white countertop. All right. Next, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. A little bit more. We're going to add ground pepper to taste. Just lowering this down a little bit more. This quinoa is a little out of control, and that's okay. Okay. Don't want this to be too peppery. And then I'm gonna whisk this first, just to kind of get these combined, get that curry powder all over the shallots. And then next I'm gonna add about 2 tablespoons of the olive oil. So as I'm whisking this, I'm gonna slowly add in the olive oil. So this helps with that to make it more emulsified without actually using an emulsifier. So we're not going to add any mustard to this. Okay, Christina, I'm gonna tilt this. So this is what the dressing looks like. Do I need to tilt it more? We're good? Okay. So they're all mixed in together, and then I'm just gonna remove this whisk. This guy over here. Oop. And we're just gonna add the rest of our ingredients to this basically. But before we do that, I just wanna take a look at this rice and quinoa. So the quinoa is bubbling away. It's starting to open up a little bit, so that is good. And with quinoa, if you added the right amount of water and it's not quite cooked at the end of the cooking time, you can always add a little bit extra water and let it simmer a little bit longer. So the rice is definitely opening up. I'm just gonna let it simmer a little bit longer. So with the wild rice, you want to add extra water. We're not necessarily worried about water to rice ratio like we would with a white rice or a brown rice. Instead, we want there to be plenty of water so that it fluffs up. And then we're going to drain it after it's done cooking. Okay. All right. So next I'm going to start cutting up my apples. So I have 2 Honeycrisp apples. So you could use whatever apples you have available, whatever apples you like to eat. The Honeycrisp just looked really good at the store, so that's what I went for. And these guys, you can cut them as big or as small as you would actually like. So this salad you can absolutely make ahead of time and just store it in your fridge. If you did want to make it day of, you can serve it warm, or you could choose to cool it down. It doesn't really matter. It honestly works best however you prefer it. It tastes good either way, in my opinion. And if you don't have apples or don't want to use apples, you can always do pears or Asian pears. Those are really good alternatives to the apples as well. So the apples are going to offer some nice crunch, some fiber, some vitamin C, anti-inflammatory effects, a whole lot of things. Okay. And before I start cutting up the second apple, I'm actually going to put my almonds in the oven to toast. So these, I actually messed up with this. I did not get slivered almonds. I got sliced almonds. So slivered almonds are a little bit thicker. These guys are a lot thinner. So I'm just going to put them on this baking sheet. They're going to go in the oven at 375. So for a slivered almond, you would want to do about 7-ish minutes or until they start smelling fragrant. These guys, I'm assuming it's going to be 3 to 5 minutes tops. So I'm just going to add maybe even 2 minutes, honestly. I'm just going to do a 2-minute timer because I don't want them to burn. 2? That? Okay, cool. All right. So I'm just going to add my apple straight to the dressing. And because there's lemon juice in the dressing, that's going to help with the browning of the apples. So you don't necessarily need to worry about them turning brown if you just leave it in the fridge. And honestly, with, any type of salad too, um, if you have something hearty like a grain and then some like harder ingredients like apples or pears, um, you can definitely get away with making it ahead of time and just letting the other ingredients kind of soak up the dressing. With leafy greens, it can be a little trickier to make ahead of time. Oftentimes, what I recommend if you have like a leafy green salad, whether that's lettuce, arugula, kale. Did that timer go off? Is that what that means? Sure. Or let me just take a look. Yeah, these guys, no, they're not even, well, they're a little bit warm. Yeah, I can't smell them yet. So maybe just do like another 2 minute. Okay, thank you. Yes, so what I was saying about leafy greens, so with leafy green salads, whether you're using spinach, lettuce, arugula, kale, it's oftentimes a better idea to keep the salad dressing in a separate container, and then just mix it day of. Okay. Maybe that's the timer? Oh my gosh, what is happening? Okay, I can definitely smell the butternut squash. It's roasting nicely. It's not quite brown. So we're gonna just let it hang out a little bit more. Okay, so I got my apples in here. And then we have some golden raisins. You could also use uh, different types of raisins. I think they're called brown raisins probably. So these are made from white grapes or green grapes. The other raisins are made from darker colored grapes. So we're just gonna add those in. You could also do cranberries if you wanted, or some other dried fruit if you wanted and just cut it up. I'm just gonna check my quinoa again. So it is definitely nice and fluffy. I don't see any liquid hanging out in the pan. So I'm just gonna turn off the heat for now. I do want to taste it just to make sure that it is tender enough. And with the quinoa, we're just gonna let it hang out in the saucepan covered off of the heat for a little while. So that helps to fluff it up even more. Oh yeah, that's done. Okay. So I'm just gonna put it to the side here so that it just hangs out. My wild rice is doing well. I think it might be done soon. Okay. I'm gonna turn this even lower. All right, so we got our raisins in here. I also have some parsley. I'm just gonna add that in real quick. And then let me check on our almonds. Okay, these are nice and toasty. So they're just a little brown. You can smell. So this is what they look like. And I'm just gonna toss them straight in here. Just gonna put you over here. Okay. So let me grab a spatula. So the only thing that is missing from here is our quinoa. So I'm just gonna give this a nice toss and then we will add our quinoa in a little bit. And I should mention, so if you didn't want to use almonds, you could absolutely use any other type of nut or seed. And if you are toasting any type of nut or seed, just make sure that you are getting a raw or unroasted, untoasted nut or seed. And the reason for that is when we toast something that has healthy oils like nuts and seeds, if we toast them for too long, those oils can turn into toxic compounds, and we do not want that. So basically, if you're toasting something that is already toasted, you're double toasting it. So you're, increasing the chances of those oils becoming unhealthy at that point. So it's best to just start with a raw nut or seed. Okay. So, okay, that was my timer for the quinoa. So we're good on that. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm actually gonna taste the rice because I want to make sure that it's not too soft. So we're just looking for it to be nice and tender. But still have a little bit of a bite to it. So I think it's done at this point. So I'm going to turn off the heat. And next I'm just going to drain it. So again, like there's quite a bit of water in there that I just added extra just to make sure that it had enough water to swim around in. So there's plenty of water to drain. Okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave the rice in the pot just to kind of hang out. So this stuffing recipe, you can serve it warm or at room temperature. It doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna keep it warm. So I'm gonna cover this guy. Again, kind of similar, the steam effect is gonna help keep it nice and tender. Same with our quinoa. Okay. Next, I just want to pierce the butternut squash just to make sure that it is going well, so I can kind of get an estimate of how much longer it's going to be. So these are starting to brown on the bottom, so that is great. Okay, I'm going to leave them in maybe like 5 more minutes just to get nice and brown. Okay, 5 more minutes. Okay, so next I want to get started on the cauliflower for the cauliflower mash. So the cauliflower I have cut up into kind of smallish florets, so they're about that big. And I also added some garlic cloves in here. So this is just a steamer basket. I have water in the pot already. So I'm just going to turn this on high heat to get it nice and boiling. And basically we're going to steam the cauliflower and the garlic together for about 10 minutes. So because steam is temperature-wise is a lot hotter than boiling water, it doesn't take very long for it to cook. So it's going to be nice and soft, and then we're going to add it in the food processor with some other ingredients, and just basically make it into a mash like a mashed potato. But with cauliflower instead. So I'm just going to let this hang out and start boiling. I'll keep an eye on it. Basically, once it starts boiling, you can reduce the heat so that it continues to simmer, but you don't want it to be all crazy and sputter hot water everywhere. So while that is going, we're going to work on the other ingredients for the stuffing. So we have our dressing already made. We want to toast our pumpkin seeds next. So we're going to be doing kind of almost like a roasted spiced pumpkin seed, you could say. So I have my skillet here. I'm just gonna do like a medium heat. And this is a nonstick skillet. We're gonna be adding about a teaspoon of oil, so not a whole lot. I already have half a cup of pumpkin seeds measured out here. So these are raw. Again, whether you toast them in the oven or on the stovetop, you want to make sure that you're using raw pumpkin seeds. I'm just going to move these guys out of the way so you guys can see a little bit better. So I already have my salt and my cinnamon measured out here. So I'm just going to add my pumpkin seeds to the oil and then the salt and the cinnamon. We're just going to mix this up. If you wanted to make these a little bit sweeter, you could add a little bit of maple syrup to it to make almost like a candied pumpkin seed. And if you don't want to do cinnamon, you could do other spices as well. I think like a smoked paprika would work really well. Maybe to keep it a little sweet, you could also do like some cardamom, some nutmeg. So these guys, we're just waiting for them to warm up, and we're basically going to toast them until they're nice and golden brown and fragrant. Okay, so while that is going, we're going to work on our other ingredients. So I have some dried cranberries here, about half a cup. So these guys we're just going to chop. They're a little bit big and kind of stuck together. So we're chopping them just to make sure that pretty much like every bite that you take of the stuffing, you get a little bit of all of the ingredients. That is the goal. I'm just running my knife through this, trying to get them. Just be really careful at this stage because they like to stick to your blade. And using a sharp knife is really important for anything that is sticky or tough. It makes things a lot easier to cut. Okay, so that's good. So I'm just going to return the cranberries back to my bowl here. So the cranberries are going to be sprinkled on top along with the pepitas, so the pumpkin seeds, a little bit of the green onion, some goat cheese as well. So it's going to be nice and festive. Okay, and I already have my green onions chopped here. So half of these are going to go in with the rice. The other half are going to be a topping. So these guys feel a little bit warm. I'm just going to give them a mix. So whenever you're roasting nuts or seeds on the stovetop and even the oven, you want to be really careful because they can burn very easily. So this is a point in the cooking process where you do not want to walk away from the stove. Okay, so let me find, where's my oven mitt? I'm just gonna take out the butternut squash because it's nice and roasted. I don't want to roast this guy too much because we still want it to be nice and plump and juicy, right? Instead of like really dry. So I'm just gonna let it hang out over here for a minute. Okay. So while these guys, again, I'm mixing them again. I don't want them to burn. And they're starting to sizzle a little bit. I can hear them. Another way to tell, like with nuts and seeds, that they're done is when they start to sizzle quite a bit. That means that those oils are popping and they're nice and hot. Okay, so along with the green onions, we're going to have some kale that goes into our wild rice. So I'm just going to take the stems off of these guys. So you want about 2 cups of the kale when it is cut up. This is just one entire package of kale from Trader Joe's, which I think is kind of the equivalent. If you got it in a bunch, you would get about this much kale as well. Okay. So the easiest way to get it off of the stem is just to pinch and pull. And you could use a curly kale for this. I like the dino kale because of the contrast. You know, it's a dark green. You could do purple kale if you wanted. That would be really pretty too. Okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna get rid of this guy. Check on my pumpkin seeds again. So they're getting nice and brown at this point. So I'm just gonna take it off of the heat. This is cold. But I'm gonna let them hang out in the pan a little bit more. For a little bit longer. Okay, this guy, they're starting to steam, so I'm just gonna let it be. I want it to cook on high for a little bit, and then we're gonna lower it once we start seeing the steam come out the sides. So for the kale, it doesn't have to be perfect in terms of how small you get the kale cut. I like to kind of just stack it on top of each other, do a cut down the middle. So this helps with getting it a little bit smaller. You could even stack it even more and then just kind of hold it down and start chopping. So because our rice is still warm, once we add it to the rice and give it a nice mix, it's going to wilt down even more. And I find that the dino kale in general tends to wilt a lot more than your curly varieties of kale. So that's another reason why I think using this variety is great for this recipe or any recipe where you're adding it to something warm or cooked. Because you don't necessarily, because of all of the layers, you don't want a whole lot of volume for each of the ingredients as well, because otherwise it's just going to fall over. Okay, so we're looking like these are kind of the pieces that I came up with. So I'm just gonna add it straight to my pot of kale or of wild rice. Okay, this guy's going. And I'm also gonna add half of my green onions. So these are the whites and the greens all together. So that's about half. Okay, and give this a nice toss. And because this is hot, I'm gonna move it back. It started cooking a little bit. Okay. So I'm just mixing it around just to get that kale to wilt a little bit more. And that cauliflower is going. I'm just going to turn it down to medium heat just to let it boil a little bit less. Okay. So let me add, let's see, anything else that we need this for? Probably not. So I'm going to add this to this platter. I hope that it will be enough. Yeah, that looks big enough. Okay. So again, you could just mix all of these ingredients together and just have everything blended together, all of the ingredients, but we're gonna attempt to make this pretty. Oftentimes that doesn't work very well in my kitchen, but as long as it tastes delicious, it doesn't really matter what it looks like, right? But if you want to wow your guests, then absolutely try to make it look pretty. Okay. Oh, I forgot to add the dressing. Okay, that's okay. We're just gonna drizzle it on top. Sometimes you just have to improvise. Okay, let me get rid of this pot so you guys can actually see what I'm doing. Okay. Just to help even out the dressing, I am gonna use a fork to kind of drizzle this a little bit more so that it's kind of all covered. Maybe I'll try to work it in actually. You could also have the dressing on the side if you wanted as well, if you know you have guests that would prefer that.
If you were making it ahead of time, would you want to leave it on the side?
Not necessarily. I think this is one of those recipes because you have the grains, that the rice is going to soak this up, the dressing up. So you could absolutely just mix it in and just leave it that way. I will say, so depending on how you want to serve this, it might be a better idea to keep like your rice mixture, so the rice, the kale, the green onions with the dressing in one container, and then have your butternut squash in a separate container, and then all of your other toppings separate as well. If you wanted to heat up the rice mixture and the butternut squash to serve it warm and then have the other ingredients on top, it doesn't matter if those ones are cold or not, that could be a good way. But if you wanted to just serve this as kind of like a cold salad almost, you could just honestly just put it on a platter and just put some saran wrap on top of it, right? Or just mix it all together, put it in a bowl, and cover it. Yeah. So it's really up to you, but I don't think you necessarily need to have the dressing on the side if you're making this ahead of time. Okay. So next, we're going to add our butternut squash. That is nice and roasted. It has some brown bits. We're just gonna pour it right on top. I'm just helping it along. And I think I forgot to mention, so this was a medium-sized butternut squash. So you don't want it to be too large, but we're just gonna make it kind of like a layered cake. I guess you could think of this. Nice and pretty. Let me get rid of these guys. Okay. How are we on time? Okay, we're doing pretty good. Just want to check this guy. Okay. I'm just gonna leave it kind of where it's at. So next we're going to add our toasted pumpkin seeds. So I'm just gonna get my hand in here. Yeah. Just to kind of sprinkle it. Okay, these are still a little hot. And if you do decide to add maple syrup or honey or agave nectar to this to make it more of like a sweetened candied pumpkin seed, please do not touch it unless it is completely cooled down because of the sugar content. You're basically, it heats up a lot longer to higher temperatures, and you will absolutely burn yourself if it's still hot. So please be mindful of that as well. Okay, next we're gonna add our dried cranberries. And again, like you could do this in whatever order you want. There's no rule to this. It's just supposed to look colorful and festive and have all of the right flavors, right? So we're getting sweetness from the cranberries and the squash and the cinnamon on the pumpkin seeds. We're getting umami from the pumpkin seeds and the rice and the kale. We're getting a little bit of bitter from the kale. The dressing has our acid, which is going to be the apple cider vinegar. And then we're adding some salty elements too with the pumpkin seeds and just the salt that we added. So you're getting a good blend of different flavors. Okay, my goat cheese. So the recipe calls for 2/3 of a cup of crumbled goat cheese. At the store I was at, they only had these softer types of goat cheese. So I'm just gonna kind of pluck it off. If you can find like a crumbly goat cheese, that would probably work better in this. But it's also personal preference. Like I prefer a creamy goat cheese. And I'm probably just going to do this entire log. It's a 5-ounce log. I'm not going to measure it. We're just going to use the entire thing. So you get a variety of different color. This goat cheese is going to give you some healthy fats, some protein, some calcium, right? We're thinking about nutrition too, even when we're cooking for the holidays. And if you don't like goat cheese, you could absolutely do a feta, you could do parm, you could just leave out the cheese altogether. There's nothing to say that you have to use the cheese unless you want to. I would even think like a smoked shredded cheddar would work really well on this as well. Even like a blue cheese, I think would work on this.
All the cheeses, just
All the cheeses, why not? You could do more than one. Right, cheese during the holidays, absolutely. And we're actually adding cheese to our cauliflower as well, our mash. So, okay. So let me rinse off my hands real quick. Yes.
Thank you, you're doing such a great job of making so many recipes.
Oh, thank you. There's a lot of planning that goes on before these classes to make sure that we don't burn the building down. All right, I'm just going to top with my green onions.
Recipes that you come up with yourself and put them together.
So just for everybody at home, are these recipes that I come up with and put them together myself. So some of these are other dietitians' recipes from our practice. We kind of all collaborate, but oftentimes, sometimes these are original recipes. If you see on the recipe that it says adapted from, we're taking those from websites and then we're kind of modifying them, also calculating any nutrition information as well. So it's not always from scratch, but oftentimes it is. Yeah. Okay, so this is the stuffing. Again, so this is what it looks like if it's layered. You could just mix everything together. It's really up to you. Again, please don't put this in a turkey. It's probably not gonna look well in a turkey. So I'm just gonna leave it over here on the side. And let's just check and see how this cauliflower and garlic is going. So the garlic, it's gonna cook really easily when you steam it. Also, so for this recipe specifically, I put the cauliflower on the bottom of the steam basket and then the garlic on top because I didn't want it to accidentally like get mashed or anything like that. So that's the order that I did things in. So this is pretty much done. It's nice and soft. We're gonna throw it in the food processor and we're gonna let the food processor do the work. Okay. So This is still nice and hot. I have my blade in here. You could also use a blender. If you didn't have any of those things, you could get away with mashing it by hand. Absolutely. Okay, gonna get rid of this. All right, so before we add these other ingredients, we're just gonna give it a run through just so it gets nice and creamy. So with the garlic, I kind of left the cloves kind of big, so we want to make sure that it's nice and blended with the cauliflower. Okay, so that's nice and mashed at this point. It's gonna get more incorporated as we continue. So I'm gonna add, I have 1/4 cup of whole milk or 2% milk. This is 2% milk. You could also use whatever milk you prefer. You could even do a non-dairy milk for this recipe as well. And then we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of butter. So I'm just eyeballing this a little bit. This is salted butter. You could use unsalted butter if you would like. This has been hanging out at room temperature, but if your cauliflower is hot enough, it will melt cold butter. Okay. And then I also have some shredded dill Havarti cheese. You don't necessarily have to use this cheese. You could use whatever cheese you would like and then add whatever herbs you like as well. I'm just going to add this in.
So if you did do a dill, what would you recommend? Like herbs for the coffee?
Yeah, so I actually saw a post by a food influencer a couple weeks ago, and she said that herbs are very personal. And I love that. Basically, what that means is, we all have different tastes, we all have different preferences. So you could use honestly whatever herbs you would like in this. So in this, we have our dill and chives. You could do rosemary, you could do sage, you could do dill and chives. Yes, you could do thyme. You could even do what am I thinking of? The one that kind of tastes like licorice. I'm blanking on the name. It'll come to me. Um, tarragon. Tarragon. You could do tarragon. And then in terms of like the cheese, you could do cheddar, you could do Swiss, you could do just regular Havarti if you can't find dill Havarti, right? You could do whatever you want in terms of the cheese. So I added a little bit of salt, pepper. The butter's already starting to melt. And then I have some chives and some dill. So for the dill, there are a couple of harder stems in here that I'm just going to pluck off because we want this to be nice and smooth. Okay. And then, so you can make this day of, serve it hot like this. Or if you wanted to make it ahead of time, what I would recommend is just putting it in an oven safe dish, stick it in your fridge with a lid or a saran wrap or whatever you want on top. And then before serving, just stick it in the oven for however many minutes to get it nice and warm. Okay, so I added my chives in here. I also have some chives to put on top. Okay, so let's give this a nice blend to get that cheese nice and melty. Okay, and I'm just going to taste it for salt just to make sure that it has enough salt. With cauliflower especially, you want to make sure that you add enough salt so that it doesn't taste bland. Okay, that's good. All right. So let me grab a spatula. Here it is. I'm just going to put it in a bowl. Just going to do it this way. And it is really nice and silky. So you could use this, for example, instead of a mashed potato, or you could just have it alongside a mashed potato. Because who wants to get rid of mashed potatoes from the holiday dinner? Nobody. Okay. All right. And this was about a medium-sized cauliflower. And I think it worked really, really well in terms of the size and the way that it looks with everything else. So I'm just going to add some chives on top, make it nice and pretty. You could also use other things, like if you are using a different type of herb, you could absolutely add that as a topping. Also, if you don't have chives, you could absolutely just use some green onion. That is a totally acceptable swap. Okay. And then the last thing we're gonna do, so I'm gonna show you guys, this is what it looks like. It's very soft, so it's kind of moving around. Then the last thing we're gonna do is add our quinoa to our salad. So it's nice and fluffy. And then I'm gonna give this a nice toss. And again, because you have the grain and then all of the other components of the salad are pretty hard, you could absolutely just have the dressing mixed in and then just stick this in your fridge, or you could serve it warm if you wanted to as well. That is totally acceptable. And I used parsley in this, but again, you could add whatever herbs you like to this. Same thing with the stuffing recipe. Okay, so this is what the salad looks like. The one thing that is kind of missing from this is a source of protein. So if you have like a turkey, ham, chicken, whatever, that's going to be your source of protein. This is a really good recipe to meal prep. I would recommend garbanzo beans, tofu, chicken, really good options for this recipe. So this is what it looks like. Do you need me to show any of the other meals again? Okay. Well, these are the recipes. I hope you try them. I hope you bring them to your dinner table and your holiday table. Again, you're getting a lot of variety of nutrients, vitamins and minerals and protein and fiber from all of these recipes. So yeah, let's eat. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Have a good night.